Let's head to the phones. GOP political strategist and co-founder of MustReadTexas.com, Matt Mackowiak. Matt, good morning. How are you?
Hey, Chad. I'm doing great. Good morning.
Thanks for coming on today. You were in Dallas over the weekend at the state convention. Tell our listeners how that went, at least from where you were sitting.
Yeah, look, I think obviously the convention was going to be an entirely different enterprise had Cruz not dropped out 2 weeks before after the disappointing Indiana results. So, in a way, there was sort of an anticlimactic feel to it. But that said, obviously, you had all the statewide elected officials address the gathering. Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick both got roaring responses, particularly Dan Patrick, who's really been going after this bathroom situation. And, of course, you had the return of Ted Cruz to his home state to really a thunderous applause on Saturday. So you had other business done in terms of the platform, in terms of rules, in terms of electing national delegates, and in terms of re-electing the statewide state GOP chairman, Tom Meckler. But there wasn't, from my standpoint, there wasn't huge controversy. And so I think, in a way, the party is in pretty good shape right now in Texas. We're going to win all the statewide offices in November again. And so, again, there was a little bit of an anticlimactic feel because the Trump-Cruz fight that we expected in terms of battling over delegates just never really happened.
Right. Visiting with Matt Mackowiak. Matt, let me ask you something about this old Dan Patrick deal with the transgender bathrooms. I keep getting asked by folks who are wondering if Dan Patrick is really this fired up about it, or if this is Dan Patrick trying to get his name out there in order to make a challenge against Greg Abbott in a few years, or to run for another office. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, Dan Patrick's not going to primary Greg Abbott. He said that Abbott's going to raise – he's already set fundraising records in the last election. He will be unbeatable at a primary if he runs for re-election in 2 years. This is something that really matters to Patrick. He's a very, very strong social conservative. You have to understand, he just, was a leader in the hero fight in Houston, where this very issue was voted on by citizens of the city of Houston, and the social conservatives won by a vote of basically 2-1, overcoming President Obama and the Democratic Party and the far left. So he saw what happened in Houston. He's seeing that now happen across the state, in Fort Worth with the ISD. And, of course, he got ahead of this, and then next thing you know, the White House jumped in on Friday. And so Patrick did get enormous attention nationally on Friday. Look, he feels very strongly about this. He told another media organization a couple days ago, I'm willing to lose re-election over this issue. So, he truly wants to lead the fight on this. You'll see Governor Greg Abbott do the same, fight very hard on this. We'll see what the legislature decides to do. I'm not sure this is a fight the White House is really committed to do this 6 months before the president leaves office, when it's going to get tied up in litigation. This is something that's not going to have a lot of impact, I don't think, in the short term.
Visiting Matt Mackowiak. Real quick, let's take a look at the national before we get back to Texas. Donald Trump is, of course, going to be the GOP candidate for president, and now it seems as though all the big publications are starting to look into Donald Trump's past in his history. You had the story over the weekend. Donald Trump may have acted as his own spokesperson back in 1991. I don't know if people care about that or not. And then the New York Times piece on Donald Trump and his women from his history. Is this what we can sort of expect going forward? And how does Trump handle this, do you think?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts on this. I think, first of all, it would have been nice to see this kind of enterprise journalism done when it might have mattered in the primary. But look, this is part of a tradition that large media organizations take a very deep look at the nominees of both parties as soon as they win their nominations. I expect a lot of this to happen around Hillary as well. She's not formally the nominee yet, but she's pretty close. But there was even a Washington Post story today about concerns about her electability among Democrats. In terms of the story itself, for it to be above the fold, on the Sunday edition of the New York Times, essentially the most valuable real estate in American media, and then to not really have anything in the story that changed the perception that already exists about Trump. Am I saying there's nothing in there that's troubling? Sure, there's boorish behavior from a man in terms of saying things to women he shouldn't be saying or perhaps doing things he shouldn't be doing. But we've already known this about Trump. This is priced into the stock. And even one of the women that was interviewed and quoted in the piece this morning said she was taken out of context on Fox this morning. So I don't know that the story's going to make that much of a difference. I do think this is going to be an area where Hillary's really going to go after Trump. And then, of course, that gives him a chance to counterpunch, which has been one of his strengths, to go after the way Bill and Hillary treated women in the 90s and in the White House. So, we'll see where it goes from here. I'm not sure this one story is going to be the undoing of Donald Trump, though.
Matt, we got about 2 minutes. What are your thoughts overall on the primaries, early voting getting starting today?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a quiet primary runoff. It feels like there hasn't been a lot of controversy. There's pockets of the state where there are competitive races, obviously. The Lubbock community cares quite a bit about the congressional runoff. We don't have open seats for Congress very often, and with Randy Nagelbauer retiring, you do have two Lubbock-based candidates running for a district that includes Lubbock and Abilene. Did see the Abilene paper endorse Jody Arrington, former vice chancellor of Texas Tech. I thought that was an important step because Abilene doesn't have a native candidate in the race at this point. This is going to come down to how Lubbock votes. But, Lubbock is going to be, I'm sure, split between their former mayor, Glenn Robertson, and someone who worked at Texas Tech, and Jody Arrington. I know Glenn has spent an enormous amount of money. I want to say over $1.5 million so far. And I know you've had debate on your air, and I'm sure there's been some attention locally to a lot of the issues. Robertson's gone very negative. A lot of times when you have a financial advantage, you go negative. Could also be that you're not maybe feeling all that strongly about positive messages that you could put out there. And I saw one of Robertson's TV ads, I think, was taken down because it may have gone after Texas Tech while trying to go after Arrington as well. So it's going to be interesting to watch. I think, you have a railroad commission runoff, which could have low turnout. You have two open state Senate runoffs, and then a number of House runoffs as well. So, there's not sort of a big, sexy race that's pulling a lot of people in, like we saw just 2.5 months ago with the presidential primary. But a lot of these races are going to matter in terms of what kind of legislators we're going to have at the state House, state Senate, and even congressional level. And so I'd encourage, folks in Lubbock to get out and vote. Early voting starts today, and your vote certainly matters in a vote where turnout's going to be low.
Absolutely. Matt Mackowiak, appreciate your time, and we encourage people to stop by your website, mustreadtexas.com. We'll know you'll be updating that shortly.
Thanks, Chad. Take care.
Have a good one, Matt. That's Matt Mackowiak.